And we are going to take a look at that tonight because if we went back to something like the English Speaking Union, which is a Freemasonic lodge, and its inspiration of things like Cecil Rhodes and various essays by J.R. Seeley and the Five Eyes Network, that was the surveillance front end put on their whole agenda. Welcome to the Grand Theft World podcast, hosted and sponsored by the members of the Grand Theft World community who got to hear a little extra green room pre-show as we were trying to get the plane off the ground tonight. You know, sometimes you click buttons and they work, and sometimes you click buttons and you got to try again. We are a little bit late getting started, but nonetheless, we're going to have a successful flight tonight. We're going to learn all about union now with Britain. You know, last week we started to observe the obvious, that King Charles and Donnie Trump, they might have a little deal cooking, a little merger cooking. You know, Trump's been talking about taking over Canada. That's one step closer to an Anglo-American establishment, which was, once upon a time, it was called for. It was called Union Now with Britain. This is the legacy of Cecil Rhodes. We're going to learn all about the deep state and its very real pieces of artifacts and information that might be manifesting into our world today. And most people out there don't have any cognizance, recognition of such major events in pulling the world away from freedom and toward tyranny. Because if you haven't noticed, Britain still has a king. This guy, he's still the king over there. King Chucky III, they fondly call him. And they didn't have a war of independence. They never spread freedom around the world. So there's a little bit of work left to do on the freedom front. Better examples need to be set than just going back to the old ways of monarchy. There's a lot of news that has happened this past week. We had 14 terabytes of Epstein alleged videos being circulated around the FBI, which that's where they've always circulated around. They've had them for years. Those people have watched them and seen them. Maybe the fresh people over at the FBI will do something about it. We'll have to see. Raiders of the Lost Ark. Is that them bragging? Because now we have an alleged CIA document where they used psychic spies to locate the Ark of the Covenant. And I just find it kind of fishy that all this information is coming out right now alongside their UFO stuff, alongside the buildings under the pyramid stories, all these sort of things. So we will get into Bonhoeffer's theory of stupidity later tonight, because I think it is much more a driving force in our culture than most people realize. And there are, you know, a small amount of evil people on the planet. And, you know, they can be, they write books, they tell you about their evil plans, but there's a lot of unwitting people who are well-intentioned and think they're good people, but because of Bonhoeffer's theory of stupidity and them not knowing about such things, just like Dunning-Kruger, unable to recognize their own incompetence, maybe, some learning we do tonight can break through onto the other side for them. We'll see. Open AI whistleblower that we've talked about in past months had roofies in his system. So how does Rohypnol get into an AI whistleblower who is questioning not only the content being used to train the large language models, but also maybe the ethics and the integrity of the whole operation that was being conducted, because it was supposed to be nonprofit, and then it turned into a profit-generating operation. We're going to look at that. We have RFK Jr. Is he being blackmailed by the deep state? That's a Candace Owens story from this past week. We will get to that in the wee small hours of the morning because we have a lot of other things to cover prior to that. James Corbett, he appeared on a Jimmy Dore show this past week. We have a clip of Secret Government of Bilderberg. That's also toward the end of the show. And I think we're going to have time to get tuned into all those stories and more. Now, I'd like to welcome my co-hosts, Scott Armstrong and Paul Verge. What's up, Scott?
What's going on, guys? Yeah, I'm excited. We had a nice team meeting this week. We're like strategizing, like as we do best around here. And I think the audience, you guys are going to love it. It's going to be really cool. And I'm excited too, because it's just good. I feel like it's going to highlight and showcase the talents of the team here in a way that's what everybody just is here for. So yeah,
I took a little peek at what you and Paul brought to the table as far as homework, and it was impressive, and then made me feel like maybe I need to up my game too. Always up in my game.
That's right. We should only be in competition with ourselves each day.
That's right. That's the healthy competition. Competition has a purpose, and the point at which you're breaking integrity to win the competition or do the thing or get the trophy, like that's where everything goes sideways. That is beyond. That's like poisonous competition. So there's healthy competition where you and your colleagues get better together from that kind of applied resistance to the situation. Whereas other times it spirals out, and it's good to know the difference. And I like the theme of your report being insofar as being humbled, having spread some information that might not have been accurate, because we all end up on social media, and it isn't very hard to do that. But I like your angle on here's how we can all improve. So well played, and I look forward to getting to that part of the show.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah.
Hey, Paul, I have a question for you.
Absolutely.
Did you ever film at World Trade Center 7 with Luke Rudowski?
I sure did for the feature film that never lived to see the light of day. It's called Believers Beware, but I do have that hour to hour and a half footage where he was sitting at the bench. I do remember that day.
When we were watching that report by him, I was thinking back, and my thinking is the prolific World Trade Center 7 Luke Rudowski footage from back in the 9/11 truth days was when the security guards were saying, "Hey, this guy's got wires in his backpack," and they were trying to set him up. Like there was already a conversation, Luke had it on camera, and then these guys turned dirty, and they're like, "We could say you have a bomb." Oh, look, this guy's, and they started setting him up, and there was that whole thing. But the day that you and I were down there with them, the helicopter overhead, anytime we tried to do any filming, it would like turn its sound on and it would drown everything out down there. And then it would sit there and run silent when nothing's going on. It was a very interesting little provocateur operation they had going on for people who were looking for some 9/11 truth back then.
Yeah, purely coincidental interruptions. It's the nature of the beast, I guess. But yeah, I think there was at least 5 or 10 usable minutes of sound from that whole hour and a half interview, and it was well worth it to reconnect with Luke. But those were the more dangerous days where he was like confronting Lord Rothschild and Lucky Larry like directly at news conferences and even on the street. So
It was interesting because it's like you see him and it's like Brzezinski, okay, or whatever. But I don't know. I'd never taken Jacob Rothschild. Like I didn't picture him like as a person walking down the street type dude, right? And when Luke is able to show you, like, here's David Rockefeller trying to get to his house, or here's Jacob Rothschild, or here's whoever else, it was inspiring and invigorating back in the day to see how accessible those people are. They're like, you can walk up to them at Bilderberg and stick a mic in their face. You can stand there while the limos are going by. And I think, when Jim Tucker was doing it in the 90s, nobody was really supporting that or getting around it or filming it, right? And then it was like the second and third generation that came through that were like, hey, we have technology and we can get in the, we can make it more inconvenient for these people and let them know they can't be secret anymore. And now Bilderberg is a well-known thing today, whereas in the 90s, that was a conspiracy theory and they would call you pejorative names back
the
in
audacity to suggest.
The audacity of that. To suggest there's some supranational, internationalist, globalist, New World Order movement when they've been writing about it for like 100 years. And we are going to take a look at that tonight, because if we went back to something like the English Speaking Union, which is a Freemasonic lodge, and its inspiration of things like Cecil Rhodes and various essays by J.R. Seeley, and the Five Eyes network that was the surveillance front end put on their whole agenda. Paul's story later tonight talks about Five Eyes and the surveillance network. So there's a lot of relevant history that is playing into today's news that is like a blind spot for 99.9% of people out there. Unfortunately, I'd like it to be 98, 97%. Like, I'm not like everyone has to know this stuff, but at least some people who are action oriented, people who are interested in freedom and endowing freedom to the next generation and giving them a chance to be responsible and maintain it. Not going to happen unless we know about the actual agendas and movers and precipitators of the things that, we see as DEI. Well, where did that come from? Agenda 21. Where did that come from? And when you trace it back, it goes back to this same network of people that are working on a very similar agenda. Rothschild declared the United States should merge with Britain. 1902. So when King Charles and Trump are talking about it, is it news or is it just them like getting to the signing of the closing for an English speaking union? So we'll get into the history around that as we delve into tonight's news show blocks. And then also, there's a new Tom McDonald song we're going to play later tonight. And let me get the first block here. Oh, first block is first story. I don't have to go to a block. I go here because this is something that I didn't know until I was preparing for the show. Apparently, Elon Musk, savior of freedom and free speech, allegedly out there being a technocrat working with Peter Thiel and the PayPal mafia, he sold his company, which is kind of a big deal. You know, he bought it for 44 billion. He sold it for 33 billion. He had built a lot of value back to get to that 33 billion. And then I find out he sold it to himself. Just a different corporate shell kind of entity. And when you lose $10 billion on a project, I imagine there's like a big tax windfall for other projects that he might have going on, like SpaceX or Tesla. I'm not sure how that works. And I think only probably his accounting team knows how all that works. But don't feel sorry for him like he lost $10 billion. He just gained like in a different bucket that he has to look out for. So this story, I'm looking at it on, it tells me to subscribe, but I really just need to log in. And I'll do that at some point in the future. Elon Musk says X AI has acquired X in a deal that values social media site at $33 billion. So X and XAI. He's trying to build out this WeChat, which is one application to rule them all, right? It's like the Ring of Mordor, but it's an app that's friendly. And it would have your banking and your social credit score and like your telephone and contacts and email and messaging and just everything wrapped into one. It's a gateway. And I mean, that's his overall plan. That's why he renamed Twitter X in the first place. And now that they have Grok online, looks like they're just like seeing the bigger market and using X as a fire hose input for their large language model. What do you guys think? Have you heard about this? Am I late to the game on this?
Well, I mean, so here's the thing. Like I kind of make a distinction between large language models and AI, artificial intelligence. I think that these are distinct things. Like I've talked a lot about it on my show in the nature of like consciousness. Like they are wanting to recreate what we call consciousness, right? Like whatever the animating force is that animates us, that we still have no idea where it resides. And you can look at it from every single angle, from a philosophical angle, scientific, religious angle. Like everyone has different explanations, understandings, and interpretations of it. And that's what they're driving towards. Is they want to be the ones that can create consciousness. But all of it is just, I think it's all just a big, eventually we'll get to a point where they have large language models that are so advanced that they can try to convince us that they are sentient and awake, but I still think that they can't create that initial spark. So yeah, it's like it's definitely an arms race, and Elon's like whoever controls the classic arms race philosophy where it's like whoever controls this technology will have the power, and so therefore we have to be the ones to drive all the technology forward, or else fill in the blank. If they get it first, then we're screwed, right? It's just that same mentality. And you know, at least Elon talks about AI type safety. You know, he's really the only one who's kind of on board with that. But who knows, dude? Like he is the one that's like really the most aggressive, I would say, out in the open about it. So it's interesting. But I think it's already changed our world and there's no going back. So I just don't know. Now, what we need is we need our own. We need a check and balance. Like the people need their own check and balance to the Elon AI, to the open AI. So I don't know what that looks like, but it's crazy.
I think part of it would look like not using their service, but instead creating your own local language models or your own locally run AIs. I can foresee even people getting together and maybe building like arrays of different computers together to run some of these models in a more local and communal way, where it's not subject to a bunch of like corporate propaganda and censorship, which a lot of these models are sort of have these filters installed, right? So, and I think it's really important to distinguish between AI, the concept of AGI, which is like the Terminator style AI.
Artificial general intelligence.
Exactly. And then quantum computing, which is moving zeros and ones at a rate that is beyond most humans' capacity to understand. So AI is always going to be limited by the amount of compute that it has. So that's why they're building this $500 billion super server farm in a box. And they're going to have to mine a lot of materials to make all the video cards and processors that go in there. But I would say, from a technocrat perspective, it's go time for them to put together all the panopticon parts into one big surveillance net and then come up with a reason for us to essentially beg for it for our own protection. And so we kind of talk about that later on in the episode, I think, because it serves a purpose of a five-eyed panopticon where it's dressed up to still somewhat feel free, but under really, really strict conditions. And a lot of times that's what like a country club prison is like. So we'll see what direction things go.
Yeah, I came across one called uncensored.ai this last week that I was messing around with. And the free version, you get maybe 5, 10 questions per day. I don't really know what it is, but I did the typical shit test that you do when you encounter a new AI. With like the first time I ran into Gemini, I ask it certain questions to see where the guardrails are at.
Yeah.
And of course, you can pretty much guess where they're at. But with uncensored.ai, man, like it went the places the other places don't allow you to go. So I'm like, okay, interesting.
The guardrails, just to see who designed the guardrails, right? The other thing I wanted to mention before I show you this, because Scott was talking about like what it looks like, and I want to show you what it looks like. But this week on Candace, she had a new sponsor. And one of the clips, I'm not sure if it was in later tonight's episode, but one of her sponsors was Oracle.
I saw that. I was like,
And I was
watching,
like,
yeah.
In case you don't know, you're talking about Peter Thiel and technocrats and PayPal mafia. Like this is the original mafia that brought network PCs. It was called back in the 90s. Like Ellison, he gets put in the Oracle project, which is publicly traded front company for a Department of Defense project that started the relational database, RDBMS, or relational database management system. So that's what it was called back in the day. And I used to work for a guy called Earl Cox, who worked on the team that helped develop the relational database. Now, Earl thought the future was object-oriented databases, and it was like 30 years later, right? So he didn't see the value. Why are you guys stopping the work on this? He's like, he wanted to go to the next thing. And he also wrote books on artificial intelligence and fuzzy logic, which is the type of computing that was used to generate these types of models that have infinite increments, right? Fuzzy logic. It's how your thermostat works. It's how cruise control and these other things that came out of the next point, the cybernetics craze. These things weren't known in the 1920s, 1930s, but they started having meetings or ideas in the 40s, meetings in the 50s, development in the 60s, and by the 70s, we have the internet. And eventually, Steve Jobs is talking about artificial intelligence back in the early 80s. Artificial intelligence is part of the cybernetic, technocratic, encroachment on our freedom and our own ability to solve problems for ourselves. However, it's only really, I think, a crutch or a danger when you don't know how to use your own mind in the first place. And then when you can use like these, large language models, algorithms, quantum computing, these things to embolden our freedom as individuals and as a species, then I think that would be intelligent use of artificial intelligence, if there is such a thing, right? If you are using it to serve people and solve problems faster, more efficiently, effectively, than you can muster as a human being at that time, I think that's a synergistic relationship and not a master-slave relationship. However, the people who brought these ideas of neural networks and fuzzy logic and these other types of ideas of cybernetics, they also, there's a popular word in our vernacular in English. It's called robot. And it comes from an Eastern European Slavic word, robotnik, which means slave. You know, think about the network. There are servers, right? And there's all sorts of like kind of master slave dichotomies. So if we're creating AI for the benefit of human beings and AI consciousness itself, you could have a synergistic relationship. But thus far, the intention to create slaves has been a major driving force. And then not only does Brzezinski call for it in Between Two Ages, and not only has, you know, killer robots and drones been discussed by the United Nations, and not only was this foreseen by Yevgeny Zamyatin in 1921 in his book We, which inspired like 1984 and Brave New World, but the idea of robots is, you know, military, like, so it's slaves then used to do what? To oppress, not necessarily go and rescue humans. I bet you they're making more military killer robots than they are rescue robots. You know, have you ever looked at the marketplace on these things? And when the UN targets killer robots, this was 10 years ago. And yet you still see the type of development we've shown you from Palmer Lucky, that guy, the arms dealer defense kid, the Elon Musk of the military industrial complex, and his advanced AI weaponry and drone networks and all these things that they've worked out. These are also part of like the technocratic agenda. Autonomous weapons systems is what they're called technically in the industry, right? But these ideas of technocracy are not being instilled to make our life better. It's about control. It's about domination. It's about not freedom. And when you look into any of these topics, you're just going to get into the history of the people who wrote about such things on behalf of bigger ideas like the Freemasons and the Empire, right? So if the Empire has a goal and the Freemasons have a goal, and that goal might be synergistic, and another group has a similar goal and they all play together against America, I bet they could mess us up for like 100 or 150 years before we even knew what was going on. Like, this is Rocky 1 and we're in like the 12th round. We need to, you know, stand back up. We need to get back up off the canvas one more time than the opponent. And that opponent is trying to cut a deal with our president whose uncle was knighted by the queen, who's the the king's mom, dearly passed away. God rest the queen, or however they say that. God save the queen. He didn't, obviously. He didn't, but he did preserve her for many generations. One of the longest serving monarchs in history was Queen Elizabeth. And yeah, so there's a larger agenda being unfolded. And the more people can get a glimpse of, here's the leg, here's the tail, here's the head. And then they start putting together like the shape of the deep state, the shape of the New World Order. And then, you know, it's not surprising to see Candace, you know, Oracle has probably a very compelling advertising offer. They got money to burn. And if she doesn't know it was like a CIA project, or that, you know, the joke is, what's the difference between Larry Ellison and God? As God doesn't think he's Larry Ellison. Then bump, right? I mean, Ellison owns the island of Lanai, like 98% of it, right? He has his own island, you know, and he's a big supporter of Trump. We played the clip as soon as Trump got in office. He's like, $500 billion or whatever, you know? So it's interesting. And I don't begrudge her for running that ad. I just thought it was ironic, given what I've known and talked about Oracle for the past 20 years.
Yeah, that was so crazy. I watched her coverage of this whole RFK thing that's coming out, and or I don't even know what's up with that, but like, you know, and then she cuts to a commercial break, starts talking about Oracle. I'm like, wait a minute, what, dude? Like, what is going on here?
Like, Oracle's way more deep state than a lot of the other things that get pointed out. So, you know, it's just interesting. It's fascinating. And, you know, I wouldn't recommend buying this book. I just needed to buy it for the artifact that it is. Unlike some of the other books, which are like must-haves to understand the world today.
Twice a year, I teach a course called Autonomy. It's a 12-week course. It teaches leadership, entrepreneur skills, executive skills, all these types of things that I saw were taken out of our education system in order to make the schooling or indoctrination system that we've all probably went through. And it has served us well enough to be interchangeable cogs in the machine of the globalists. But if we want a homestead, if we want write our own ticket, work from home job, work from anywhere type of situation, they're not exactly handing those out at the end of college. They give you a piece of paper and they're like, good luck. So reality is dropping us off here, but the demands of reality are up here. So I created Autonomy to help people close that gap for themselves so they can level up their skills to the demands of the situations that life is putting in front of us presently. Life's demands of intellect and understanding precision and complexity are ever increasing. The schooling didn't prepare us for it. The media is not going to do anything but reinforce what schooling prepared us for. And so we're going to have to take a leadership position and take steps off the beaten path to kind of blaze our own trail in life. What makes the Grand Theft World podcast unique, invigorating, exciting, and informative? Most other podcasts out there are either doing straight up interviews or they're just covering the daily news. They're covering current events from the day they happened. And that is effective. It's useful. It's a great starting point. And then sometimes these current events change during the week past the first story. So we like to give it a little time. You have to wait till some of the dust settles on these stories in order to give them accurate coverage. And the other thing that's really missing in the media landscape is covering the articles that are coming out every day. That's great. That's necessary. But who's bringing in contextual history so that you can understand what has been going on for decades and decades to lead up to the machinations and actions that we see unfolding today? So what we do here on the podcast is we cover current events. Many of these things are censored, but we wait about a week. As a forensic historian, I focused mainly through my career on the history of globalism and collectivism and things that they call maybe the New World Order. There's a lot of facts to these sort of circumstances, groups, events, activities, working groups that they've had over time. So for Grand Theft World listeners, we not only break down the current events, most of which that are censored during the week, we provide you with contextual history, we give you the source notes, the references, we do deep dives, and this really empowers you with an understanding of context and history so that you can make more informed decisions in your life. There's also a community, a membership where you guys can actually ask questions and we can get into the show and we can share evidence. And there's a town hall weekly for Grand Theft World for those who listen to it and are interested in covering the stories that we don't get to during a 6-hour show. Listening to it an hour a day, you could easily consume the week's news, but you're going to have substance and meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
Come on, man. What are we talking about? Come on, man. No.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job to, as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man. Come